think we've hit a pretty big milestone when it comes to power creep in Magic the Gathering. With Wilds of Eldraine spoilers today, we just seen the upgrade of a historically landmark blue spell. And I wanted to use that as a discussion point to talk about power creep, talk about where that takes design in Magic, and how that's changed and potentially could change cards that we see in the future. Now, hopping right into it and not taking you too far away from the card, I wanted to talk about an upgrade to Divination that we see. So Divination is been a landmark draw spell for blue, one that seems historically fair, rather common, and we've seen in standard for a while. 1 blue and 2 at sorcery speed to draw 2 cards. A pretty good template, actually, and one that many cards have tried to work around, copy. But in Wilds of Eldraine, we just see a straight upgrade. This is literally textbook power creep. In quick study, we see 1 blue and 2 for an instant that draws 2 cards, and let alone a common. The fact that Divination for so many years has been around with us, has never been changed. We've always seen mana costs change, whether increase or decrease, more cards, less cards, or maybe put on creatures, but we've never seen the card template straight up upgrade to instant speed. And I think this is where things change. We especially see this at common for more availability in sealed and draft formats, but also for pauper players to mess around with. Drawing 2 cards at instant speed is a lot more powerful than people think at this CMC. Now, it's not really a discussion about the card itself, but more so the upgrade to it. The fact that from 2009 to 2023, we've never had a strict upgrade to Divination. At this mana cost, we've had better cards than Divination, but at the CMC and at the ability, instant speed is a straight upgrade. Now, I wanted to talk about from here the different modes of power creep, and whether that be direct or indirect, how we've seen them throughout Magic's history. Now, we can see some more direct upgrades in power creep. One where, especially like Divination, we see maybe CMCs be the same, power and toughness, and relative color and ability of the card stay the same. Maybe the card is meant to be aggressive and you get the aggressive upgrade, or it's a red card and it stays a red card. And I think historically, one that we've seen more recently with the Modern Horizons says in Jackal Pup, a 1 mana 2/1 that historically was seen as a very busted Magic card. For each 1 damage dealt to Jackal Pup, it deals 1 damage to you, so it's a very bad blocker, but 1 mana 2/1 is very powerful. And now with Modern Horizons, we saw Ragavan Nimble Pilferer. Now this card has dash, it's a monkey pirate, it's 2/1. Whenever it deals combat damage, it steals a card, it makes a treasure. Like, it literally power creep to the max. If you gave this card to someone way back in the 90s of Magic playing Jackal Pup out of Tempest, like, absolutely insane. So I think it goes to show that direct power creep has been around in Magic for a while, but I think just upgrading Divination goes to show that it happens even historically more recently, that you don't need all these bells and whistles like dash and treasure and all this stuff. At least this is a mythic, but Divination is a common and a straight upgrade. But this is a more direct example. And with indirect power creep, this is more so where cards are outclassed or they're kind of sent back down because of cards that are more recently printed. I think this is actually pretty well highlighted with something like Tarmogoyf, one that we saw be like hundreds of dollars at some point with the whole goyf-gate incident and everything, bringing light to a card like this. Historically, one of the more powerful cards in Jund and in Zoo decks alike nowadays, honestly, but it just gets outclassed by Fatal Push. And this is an example of more indirect power creep, where the introduction of a spell, arguably Fatal Push was probably one of the biggest turning points in Magic's history. Let's be honest with ourselves. The rate of this card changed removal and control in Magic without anybody really realizing, but that's a whole other video. And so Fatal Push ticking down Tarmogoyf and making it really hard to actually deal with. The Doomblade variants that we're actually going to discuss later in the video didn't need to be played anymore. You could just play Fatal Push and Tarmogoyf would get ticked down. Now Tarmogoyf is just really cheap, pennies on the dollar compared to what it used to cost. And again, indirect power creep is another example of that. The last one that I want to talk about is a more egregious example, a wild example of power creep. And that's how Jace the Mind Sculptor was considered one of the more powerful planeswalkers in Magic's history. And now with the printing and banning of Oko in many formats, you see a lot of red there at the bottom. Oko Thief of Crowns cementing itself as probably one of the biggest design mistakes unknowingly at the time out of Wilds of Eldraine, as it's only fitting that we talk about this card going into Wilds of Eldraine and not from Throne, where Oka Thief of Crowns literally took a Black Lotus in a vintage top 8 and turned it into an elk to swing for lethal. Black Lotus, considered one of the most powerful Magic cards ever printed, reduced its ability to just be a 3/3 green elk to swing for lethal, showing you the power of how valuable Oko is in compared to the historical powerhouse of Magic. Power creep at its finest. Now, this is again a more wild example, but I think just highlighting power creep is important in the 3 different ways that it exists in my view. And this is where I think it's important to discuss design, why this power creep is important, and where we've seen this in design and we could see this coming up. And specifically with design, I want to talk about the types of design that we've seen, whether it be reprints of cards, adjacent upgrades where it's a similar effect, or just straight up failures in design, and where we could revisit them. So firstly, we can discuss something like what Doomwake just tweeted, where out of this is hilarious. Out of Wilds of Eldraine, we have Dream Spoilers, which is literally the same card as Dream Spoiler Witches, but arguably worse because Dream Spoilers is a fairy warlock, whereas Dream Spoiler Witches is a fairy wizard. I feel like wizard is a better subtype, but this is literally just the same card. And this is an example of, I guess, the Doomblade effect, where you just have all these Doomblade variants and I guess adjacent design. And now this is a little bit different. This is literally just a reprint of the same card. So this is a bit of an outlier. Not many of these exist in Magic, but I thought it was funny to highlight something else out of Wilds of Eldraine. But next one is really Spell Pierce. And we've seen this type of design happen where we have a common spell that works really well in a standard or a constructed set, valuable in the draft format, and we want to reprint them. We have so many different arts, whether it be judge promos or just common printings in standard. These cards have been printed all throughout Magic's history, so many different arts, and it's really interesting to see that this card has stood the test of time. Spell Pierce has been a really powerful card. It's still played in many constructed and eternal formats alike. It's a powerful card. And even a card like, well, Doomblade has seen a similar type of thing where you may not get a similar reprinting, but you get adjacent designs based on maybe the constructed format that it's printed in. Something like Cast Down has been a Pauper staple, but you can't destroy a non-legendary creature. The aforementioned Doomblade target non-black creature, whereas Eliminate in M21 was for creatures and planeswalkers, but the restriction was CMC 3 or less. So you get upgrades, right? Even Infernal Glass was seeing like a lot of hype. You can't see it behind my window, but destroy target creature, you lose 2 life. There's a lot of powerful cards that exist, and these are some of the examples of design where we see reprints as a form of design to reintroduce an ability that is and will stand the test of time, or we see an ability of reprinting with different restrictions to fit the constructed environment or the Magic era at the time, such as Doomblade, where destroy target non-black creature is just fine, but maybe Eliminate's better because you want to deal with more Teferis, or maybe something like Heartless Act is better because there are actually a lot of counters in the format. A lot of these effects are important. And with that, I want to take my ultimate conclusion to this video and where I'm ultimately leading everyone with this power creep, where I think it's time to revisit certain mechanics and understand that from a design perspective, if we're power creeping cards, if we're making them better, it's only fair that we go back to mechanics that maybe weren't as successful or maybe hated and revisit them in a way to make them more understandable to the public. And again, as the screen mentioned, this is a hot take moment. I want to revisit Companion. That's right. I've taken a video about Divination and I brought it back to Laurels of the Dream Den. Now, stay with me here. I understand many of you don't like Companion, but I would appreciate it if you just hang around and stick to the arguments that I'm simply presenting. Now, I want to revisit Companion in the sense of not unbanning the companions that are already gone out of the formats, but simply understanding that when Wizards said that, or at least Mark Rosewater said, that the design space around companions was very limited, I'm calling crap on that. I think that the design template of Zerda is actually a very good example of why I don't believe that to be true. Zerda itself, the kind of static effect, is literally just training grounds. If you read the effect, I'm going to come back. You can pause this video if you want. Abilities you activate that aren't mana abilities cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana cost in that cost to less than 1 mana. Literally just training grounds. So with that template, why couldn't we take other enchantments, historically powerful static ability enchantments, and put them on other companions and provide some dex restrictions, and then introduce some other tools that decks can have? The companion mechanic was power creeping in Magic. It introduced a new zone in Magic, an upgrade, a kind of command zone for constructed formats. And that's where I think we can move forward. I don't mean adding more zones. I don't need a new zone added every single year. I mean, take some of the space that you've already made and add something new. Whereas something like this, let me give you a good example of this. With Bitter Blossom, of a historically very powerful and well-known mid-range and control win condition that's existed throughout Magic's history, why don't we take the template of that, turn into a companion? Now, this is something I've drafted up myself, and this card is called America. It's 3 CMC. It's a 1/1 for a fairy rogue with flash flying. Each creature in your deck has to have flash or flying with converted mana cost 3 or less. And at the beginning of your upkeep, lose 1 life, create a fairy. It's the Bitter Blossom effect. Now, whether or not this card is broken is beyond me. I've just drafted something together. But what I'm trying to show you that it's relatively easy to take enchantments like this, take design space, and implement on the power creep that you've already introduced into the format. We still see companions exist all throughout constructed and eternal formats. We already see decks and high-level tables take advantage of the mechanic. So why can't we innovate and power creep on mechanics like this to create diversity? Because now the selection isn't there. When I talk about selection, I've used my previous points to highlight that there are different versions of Spell Pierce, so it's not an expensive card. You have different forms of Doomblade, so you already have the ability to pick and choose what you can best fit into your metagame. So why can't we create variety to allow decks to pick and choose between the companions? Why did we have to just say that the mechanic is too busted, let's not revisit it, a lot of outcry? I think it's worth it. And at some point, I think we have to. And before we kind of hit to conclusions, I do want to say that this artwork was taken from Fairy Lights on DeviantArt, so I will link them down below. Definitely just a random search, but I do want to highlight the artist regardless. And then finally, the conclusion that I want to make is, I think that power creep is inevitable. I think power creep is important to card games and TCGs in general, but I think in moderation. You have to have a reason for the power creep. And I think I understand the frustration of many old head, kind of cemented Magic players out there. They don't want to see their beloved Magic cards change. They don't want to see histories being wiped out. The games that they've won through Divination, they don't want to see that change. And I understand that, but there's also a new era of Magic cards and Magic players that will intertwine and use each other to create their own histories. And that has to be allowed too, with their own cards, with their new powerful mechanics. And I think Wizards won't run out of mechanics, but I think it's important to understand that some mechanics exist and it's okay to implement on them or improve them and further use them similar to the companion mechanic. Now, let me know what you think of power creep in general in the comment section down below. Am I off base? Am I just taking this too far with the companion mechanic? Or what did you think about my discussion around power creep? Do you think that it's too soon for Divination to be power-crept? Let me know all in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have fun, I don't know, whether it be casting a companion or an instant speed Divination. Enjoy slinging some spells.